Hey, in this video I'm going to talk about the idea of the truth and essentially just like what true means, or what it could mean really. Because there's I don't know, there's a lot of different things that you could use the word like true or truth to mean. And I think the main like duality to put in place is the idea of like the absolute um, like truth of enlightenment type of thing, and the on the other side of it, the truth that can actually like be spoken and communicated. Because fundamentally, the like absolute truth is kind of like an unspeakable thing, and that's just kind of like an axiom, I guess, is that like the real truth at the bottom of everything, or like the deepest the deepest truths in the world are all unknowable and unspeakable, and can only really be encountered through your like direct experience. So most of what I'm going to be talking about is kind of on the other side of that, of just the truth that can be communicated and spoken. And I think within that, there's kind of the common distinction between the objective. I think I should say truth and reality are very very similar concepts, but they're definitely a little bit different. So I might mix them a little bit. But what I'm going to say is that the people talk about objective reality and subjective reality. And so you can also talk about objective truth and subjective truth, where objective truth is kind of the assumption, like it's acting under the assumption that there is some truth that like everybody would agree on, and that by finding that, or like talking about it, you can speak objectively about things, and no matter who you say it to, they'll always agree that this thing that you're talking about is the truth. Like it's it's like an unchanging, inarguable truth. But the subjective truth is something that's more, I think, more legitimate to my mind. But it's saying that there's things that are only true to you, or only true depending on your like opinion of the world. And these are things that are much more like a belief, or like a just your personal like preferences, or personal, just like ways that you tend to view things. You know, it's kind of like a lighter form of. It's like a very, very like constantly changing truth that matters mostly to you, and you can maybe convince somebody else of it, but it's not something that's going to. It's not something that's going to be nearly universal. But I think this delineation between objective and subjective is useful to talk about, but I think it's kind of an ideology, like a way of thinking about things that ignores the first part of the truth that I was talking about, of the kind of unspeakable truth. Because the description I gave of objective truth, about it being, something that everybody would agree on and something that doesn't change, is almost like the description of something that pretends to be absolute. Because something that's truly like an absolute, like part of reality, would have those qualities of being unchanging, and anybody that saw it would agree on what it is. But the problem with the things that we communicate between each other is that they can never actually be unchanging, because you can never say the same thing twice and have it be exactly the same thing, because things like words are always spoken by a person, and they're always heard by a person. And even if you are like really unchanging in the way you say things, and the person you're talking to is very like firm in their beliefs, like human beings are just too variable and too just not constant and like not objective, for the objective truth to actually be something that can ever be communicated in a way where it really is unchanging. So I think the traditional objective subjective thing is kind of all subjective, and the real objective truth is something that can't actually be communicated. So I think in the interest of speaking more like clearly about it, I think it makes more sense to say there's like the absolute truth, the personal truth, and the collective truth. Where the personal truth would be essentially the subjective truth, as well as things that you think are objective that are kind of more just objective according to you, or according to like a small group of people. And I think the collective truth that I would say, like that I would describe, is kind of a more honest form of objective truth. And getting to the topic of reality, I think it's a more like real form of reality is this kind of collective agreement where it's less of like pretending that there is some knowable truth that we would all agree on. It's more just starting from the point of, this is something that we already agree on, so let's just act under the assumption that this is like pretty true, or like true enough, you know? Because starting from the assumption that we're talking about like a true, objective, like external reality is kind of just a big assumption to make. And it's a much smaller assumption to assume that when we're talking about like some collective idea, we're agreeing on more or less what the idea is and like what the truth of it is. And I think it's it kind of undermines the notion that I think a lot of people have that, you know, you can know things for sure, and that kind of like we're safe under the, I don't know, like under the wing of science and rationality. But relying on the idea that those things are, you know, like immovable and like always going to be reliable, you know, 1,000 years from now, is a very limiting belief. And I think the assumptions underpinning that are assumptions that you kind of need to drop if you want to kind of get more with more in line with what people are experiencing in the world. And yeah, I think the bottom line for talking about the truth is grounding it in things that you experience and that other people experience. Because while the idea of like what you see and what you hear is within the realm of personal truth, you know, like the subjective truth, where like it's like you see, I don't know, like you see a piece of media, like a picture, like a movie, and you say that it's good. That is obviously very subjective, but when you see like like an athlete or something, and you know, like a sprinter or something, and you see them sprinting, and you can tell, like you know enough about running that you can tell that they're really good at it. You can say that they're good at it, and it's still a part of your personal truth, but it's much closer to being a collective truth, because you have the underpinning of that knowledge of what it means to be good at like running, or good at, you know, whatever thing you're talking about. And with the movie example, if you're like a movie critic or something, you know, obviously that type of thing is a little more subjective, but the more knowledge you have about something, the more the truth that you have as your personal truth will line up with, you know, whatever collective truth is formed by that body of knowledge. But it almost, I think the thing I'm trying to say, with kind of like the common thread between all the different types of truth is that they're based on kind of like the conscious observation of things. And and yeah, this gets into ideas of how like observation creates reality, and how we can change the world we live in, that type of thing. But I think you don't even have to go that far into the rabbit hole to see that it's just that the truth and like the world. I shouldn't get to it mixing the terms, but the truth is something that is like it's like the reason we care about the truth, I guess, is because there's some instinct in us for the world to make sense, and for us to have like a way to interact with the world that we can predict, how the world will respond to it. And imagining that the world is always going to respond the same way to any sort of thing, which is kind of the assumption you make with thinking that there's some objective truth, that's just less in line with the experience of being a human, and seeing that the same thing done 100 times will have 50 to or even 100 just 100 different results. And just getting more in line with like what you experience when you test out the truth for yourself. I think whatever conclusions you draw from that, you'll just be able to gain a more precise view of the world, where you're no longer making guesses based on what some big overarching collective truth says about the world, and you can more form your own personal truth, and then it's forming your own personal truth while also like aligning with a collective truth that allows that space for you to actually have your own truth within it, rather than needing to be a part of a collective truth that tells you what everything is, like tells you all the truths that you need or that you think you need. Sort of the idea of like believing a religion and believing that the religion is the only way to understand things, whereas you can believe in a religious practice without believing everything that everything in your world is going to be explained by the religion. And so you can form your own personal truth about the world, and it could be in completely different terms than the terms that the religion has. But you can coexist between this personal truth and collective truth by, at least on some level, recognizing the absolute truth that is outside of both of them. Because the absolute truth and the knowledge that the fundamental truth is something that's unspeakable gives you a bigger perspective on things, and reminds you that there's no collective truth, there's no objective truth that will ever explain everything. Because outside of that, there's always the fact that things can't really be explained. At least they can't fully be explained. And I think that that just kind of ability to switch between perspectives and just recognize the things you believe as your own beliefs, and the things that other people believe as beliefs of a group rather than truths about reality. I think it's a very important thing for just making sense of the world and just understanding your place in things. Yeah, I think that's about it. I'll give a quick summary that so there's many different types of truth that you can point out in the world, and I think the most accurate way of explaining it, or the way that I would choose to explain things, is as an absolute truth that kind of incorporates everything, but can't actually be spoken directly, and can't actually, it doesn't prove anything, it kind of just like disproves other things. And then within that, there's what I would call the collective truth and the personal truth. But you could also say the objective and subjective truth. But I think those terms are a little, I think they're kind of blind to the absolute truth. Because objective truth, like objectiveness, seems to claim that it is absolute, at least from certain perspectives. So what I'm saying instead is collective truth versus personal truth. With collective truth just being like the things that multiple people agree on, and usually in the form of like large groups, like cultures and religions. Whereas the personal truth is something that is purely what you believe, or at least like what your close-knit group, like your family or your close friends, believe. And I think that's really the source of, I don't know, just like the ability to check what the truth is. Because what you personally experience is the most true thing in your experience. Like the most true thing in your life. Because what other people say is never going to be nearly as true as what you can see with your own eyes or hear with your own ears. And while everything you see is colored by your past experiences and your own, prejudices, that's going to be true of anything, like anybody's perception of the world, and even like a large body of knowledge, where people have, incorporated a lot of laws and a lot of like really complex understandings. No matter how complex and how like well studied something is, it's always going to be a little bit subjective. It's always going to be a little bit colored by, who's presenting it, how it's being presented, and even the context of like when you're coming into contact with this thing, like with this collective truth. So yeah, I guess kind of the moral of this is that there's no real truth that you can, write down on paper and, or hear from somebody else. You kind of just have to accept, you don't have to, but the most in line with reality you can be is to accept that you'll never really know the truth, but to act under the assumptions that are most in line with what you actually experience. But yeah, I think all of these things are kind of predicated on knowing what that absolute truth looks like and feels like. Because you can't actually know what it is, because it isn't anything actually. It's sort of just it's just sort of like a like the closest you can get to it is to describe what it isn't, which means you can never really describe what it is. But the more you can incorporate that like that non-existent truth, or however you want to say it, the more you can incorporate that into your way of viewing things, the more flexible your view of things is, and the more resistant you are to falling into kind of the belief systems that claim to be true and claim to not be just another take on things. Because yeah, that's all we can really talk about is our opinion or other people's opinions. But yeah, that's about it. It's very cold today, but I'm feeling very dedicated to forming this cold resistance. I don't know too many techniques for it yet, but I think I have some ability so far to just like breathe deeply and like keep my blood vessels from closing up, because that seems like the most this actually kind of ties into what I'm talking about, the truth. The greatest danger is like from the cold is like closing your blood vessels and losing blood supply to your hands and your feet. And that triggers like a fear response in your body, where the body thinks it's really, really cold, even though the only reason it feels so cold is because of the initial response of closing the blood vessels. Because it's like 50 degrees out, and there's no way I'm gonna die, unless I was out here for like hours and hours without a jacket. But my body is still in like a moderate state of fear, because it can feel that my hands and feet are cold. So it thinks that I need to like get inside and get to the warmth. But I don't know. The truth that the body sees is fairly disconnected from the collective truth, and is very disconnected from the absolute truth, because the body is so concentrated on surviving, and has so much like I get a little esoteric, but it's so much like genetic memory and morphic memory of like dying of the cold, or like just barely surviving the winter, that you kind of have to like show your body that it's safe, and just like, I don't know, like kind of show it the danger of being cold, and allow it to see that the danger isn't actually going to kill you. It's just going to make you feel unpleasant for a bit. Which, I don't know, is a complicated process, because you have to be kind to your body, but you also have to, on some level, like shock it into realizing the more fundamental truth that yeah, the cold is not that dangerous. But but yeah, that's about it. I'm realizing I should talk about like genetic memory and that stuff at some point, because that is a very cool topic, and something I thought about a lot when I was reading the book Dune. So they talk all about the like science fiction version of that, but yeah, that's for another time. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe, and yeah, peace.